Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to take a moment of your time. My name is Bree Burks, and I am part of the Site Solutions team here at Viva. We are partnering with Black women in clinical research and my friend Danielle Mitchell in two ways. First, we're partnering to provide awesome career opportunities. Look out for upcoming lunch and learns or visit careers.viva.com to learn more. And second, to make you aware of a free application available to sites. SiteVault helps CRCs and CRAs work better together by helping sites go paperless and provide a great remote monitoring experience. It's great for sites because it can be used across all studies and it's 100% free. There are no strings attached. And Viva provides validation and support from a dedicated team of former clinical research professionals. It's great for CRAs because it provides a seamless experience for remote monitoring with a single login across all sites. SiteVault is connecting more than 5,000 sites on the same platform used today by more than 400 industry sponsors. Tell your sites to learn more and to sign up at sites.viva.com.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Mitchell. I'm the CEO and founder of Black Women in Clinical Research. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are going to be talking about Study Startup, and I will start by introducing my lovely host, Andrika Thomas. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I am Andrika Thomas. I am a clinical project manager. I am also the creative director for Black Women in Clinical Research. Happy to be here with you all this evening. Thank you.
And I'll throw in the interview prep queen in there. Also, my other host, Courtney.
Hi, I am Courtney. I am a CRA apprentice with PPD currently and a member of Black Women in Clinical Research, just like you all.
Thank you, Courtney. Okay, and we have our speakers, Tiffany Meekins, and we also have Brittany Scott. So Tiffany, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good evening, you all. It's so nice to meet you all, see you virtually. I am Tiffany Meekins. I am from Durham, North Carolina. I am a graduate of Winston-Salem State. I am a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Chapter Sorority Incorporated. I'm just excited to be here with you. I am a clinical operations manager at PPD, part of Thermo Fisher. Next month, I will have been in the industry for 13 years. I love everything about Study Startup, clinical research. Clinical research also introduced me to my husband. He is a CRA at PPD, part of Thermo Fisher. So I owe a lot of my life and everything to clinical research, and I look forward to exploring Study Startup with you ladies this evening.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. You're gonna have to tell us more about this love story. We're gonna have to have clinical research and love. Find your husband.
Absolutely.
So, and I hope that you and your husband will be there at the conference. Tell him he's invited too. I want men to know that they can come too. I know, some of the men like, I don't know, it got women in there. I don't know if that means I can join, but men are invited as well.
All right.
Brittany, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Like Tiffany, I'm extremely honored and excited to be here with you guys this evening to explore all things Study Startup. I live here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and my career in clinical research and Study Startup specifically started in 2019 at PPD. I did regulatory, and that was for about a year. But since then, I have been in Study Startup as a contract and budget specialist and subject matter expertise. So that is kind of like my bread and butter. It's my baby and I love it and everything that has to do with it.
Well, thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Our first question, what motivated you to pursue a career in clinical research Study Startup?
You want me to answer this one first, Brittany?
Yep. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Okay, sure. So, like many people, when you come out of college, you're trying to figure out what's next, what are you going to do? So I actually was very lucky that my mother was a CRA. She's still in the industry to this day. So her and my godmother have been in clinical research all my life, and I used to hear them talk about clinical research. So when I came out of college, I was just like, okay, let me get a job. So that was the focus, right? Let's just get a job, get a paycheck. But during the course of my time working in clinical research, my grandmother was diagnosed with urethral cancer, which she did pass away from. And then my grandfather passed away from dementia, and they were my rock. And so once I lost both of my grandparents to diseases like these, I knew that clinical research was not a job anymore for me. It would be my career. Um, and my why, what I tell people all the time is find your why on what it is that you love about clinical research or why you want to do clinical research, because those are the things that will keep you going when the days get long. And for me, my why is simple. If something we do on a day-to-day basis allows someone else to have just one more day or one more moment with their loved one, then our lives and our jobs have been impactful. So those are the things that I try to remember and take with me. So that is why I am in clinical research, and more so why I'm in study startup.
Well, thank you for sharing, Tiffany. And I know even with me, like hearing about that, I really feel passionate, with clinical research, and that's partly my why too. So sorry, hearing about your grandmother and your grandfather as well. And I feel like a lot of times too, you need to have that passion that helps drive you. And like you said, determining your why, like why are you interested in clinical research? What is going to help you on those days where you don't want to get up and work and you're saying to yourself, my boss is getting on my nerves. So
Right.
you need to have those days that will help push you through that. So thank you for sharing as well. Brittany.
Yes, so I graduated from UNC Charlotte, and I graduated in 2015. And so when I did, I had a degree in sociology, so it was nothing science oriented. And to be quite honest, when I went into college in 2011, I was in the School of Business, and accounting honestly just tore my tail up, and I ended up actually failing out of there. So my degree was nothing that was like science or math oriented, and really I honestly didn't think that I would be good in a career that was heavily focused on either one of those. So when I first graduated, I worked at a call center, and I had a manager there that was leaving, and she was getting ready to go work at another call center, but it was like a medical type call center where basically we were calling to verify people's insurance coverage for different treatments that they were getting. So through that, I got very much exposed to a lot of foundational healthcare terms, different skills in healthcare, definitely a lot of different healthcare terminology. With that came a lot of just like oncology terminology. And so from while I was working at that the call center, I became like a program lead. So I was over an oncology program. So I learned a lot about cancer. I learned a lot about clinical trials at that point, because we were at where I worked was before a clinical trial was really even thought of. Or sorry, it was after a clinical trial was done. So these people were on medications. They were either having success from them or not having success from them. So at that time, I was actually living in Morrisville, and I worked maybe 2 or 3 minutes from PPD and Biogen. And just like anyone else in the world, life was getting expensive and everything was going up except for my paycheck. So I started looking for other jobs that I would be able to do, that I could use that very foundational healthcare experience to get me into really more, not a job, a career, where I would be able to grow, where I would be able to learn, where I would be able to get additional health leadership experience and really make a difference. And it really, I was passionate about making a difference in like a place with science and math and technology. As a Black woman, I thought it was very important for me to create space for people like us in those places. So honestly, just through a simple search of the companies around me, which at the time were PPD and Biogen, I was introduced into clinical research in the world of study startup. And that's when I started as a regulatory associate. And that I really learned I was like, even if you don't work in clinical research, when you get that job, just speaking optimistically, a big part of study startup is, yes, there's training, but also like learning on your feet. So I was just very much so submerged into the world and loved it and grew from there.
Yeah, so regulatory is how I got my start as well. Regulatory, I don't know, a lot of people know that regulatory is a beast.
Yeah, it is. It
Like
is.
if you, I feel like if you could do regulatory, you could do
You
any,
really can do.
yeah,
Yeah,
you can do any position in the industry. And
yeah.
so with my next question, a lot of times there are different responsibilities that you need in order to be involved in study startup. What are some of those key responsibilities and tasks involved in study startup, Brittany?
I would say a big one is time management. Study startup is like constant pressure because we are trying to get sites activated so that they can begin having these clinical trials. And so with that comes a lot of pressure for sites to submit to the IRB in a timely fashion. There's a lot of pressure for sites to submit their regulatory documents. There's a lot of pressure to get the contract and the budget negotiated in a timely fashion so that you guys can do the site activation meeting. So you're being able to manage your time effectively so that because a lot of times you'll be on multiple studies and you will have multiple priorities. And I think another constant in study startup is everything is a priority. So being able to really manage your time so that you can dedicate yourself to the different priorities that you'll have across many studies is going to be extremely important. So I would say time management, and also I would say communication is extremely important. Communication / relationship building, being able to communicate and sustain really great open pathways of communication, not only with your team internally, whether it be your CRAs, your regulatory people, project managers, but also externally working with your different vendors and your different sponsors, making sure that you have great, strong, effective communication pathways is very pivotal in study startup.
Thank you, Brittany. What about you, Tiffany?
Um, as a manager, I try to tell my team to keep an open mind and flexibility. When you come in for the day, you can have a to-do list, right? This is what I'm going to focus. And by 9 a.m., that to-do list is out the door. Okay. And you have to be able to adapt and move on and handle what has been thrown at your way, right? So you cannot just say, oh, I'm staying stringent and this is what I'm going to do. No, you have to be able to make a change and be okay with that, because literally things come at you fast in study startup. Also, you have to be able to think outside of the box. These sponsors want everything done yesterday. And how can you help a site achieve that? Sponsors don't want to hear the site didn't respond. Sponsors don't want to hear I can't get in touch. Sponsors want to hear I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to take on this responsibility, I'm going to do this extra task, I'm willing to stay late, log on early. I'm not saying that it's something you have to do all the time, but they want to hear the things that you're willing to do outside of just the status quo, because that is how things get done in study startup. I'm not sure if you know this, but study startup is one of the only things or the only phases in clinical trial where you can actually move things quicker, right? You can't move site visits quicker, right? You can't, the visits that the sites do, the patients come in, you can't say, oh, this week we want the patient to come in and then can they come again next week? You can't do that. We can't clean the data quicker. We can't close the sites quicker, but what we can do is get the site started up quicker. And that is why in startup, you have to have an attitude of what can I do to move things quicker, because we determine how quickly a drug will get out to those people who need it. So I would say open mind, flexibility, and ability to pivot are important for study startup.
And like we were saying too, like with regulatory, like being able to do, a lot of the regulatory tasks. Because when I was a regulatory coordinator, I had to submit to the IRB as well. So, would you guys say that being a regulatory coordinator would be a good way into a role of study startup?
Absolutely. If you don't know the reg docs, you can't. The only other side of study startup
I was
where the
going to say
reg
the same
docs,
thing, like,
the only other side would be the contract specialists, right? The people who negotiate the budgets and contracts. So if you're a numbers person and you're like, you know what, I don't want to look at documents all day, but I can look at a contract and tell someone that they need to move these terms around or these numbers aren't adding up in these budget, that is another way in Study Startup, because everybody knows everybody wants to get paid and nobody wants to get paid more than these sites do, okay? Some of them will tell you that you can't even send your regulatory documents until they have their contract and budget fully executed, right? So if that's something that you're interested in, that's definitely another side of Study Startup that you could get in, and that's with the contract specialist role.
Okay, definitely sounds like you need to be able to take the initiative and be a go-getter, and to be able to start the studies up quickly and efficiently. Okay.
Absolutely.
For sure.
So we already kind of touched on this, but if there's anything else that you would like to share, any additional information you would like to share about the qualifications and skills that are essential for someone aspiring to work in clinical research study startup?
One thing we didn't touch on is the informed consent, and that's another big piece that's a part of Study Startup. And I don't know if anybody's ever had a surgery or procedure, and you have signed an informed consent, right? And that is very important to let the subject know what is going to be going on in the trial. And so, if you're struggling trying to get a job, you got an old informed consent, someone who signed one, something, take the time to start reviewing and see different parts that are in it, how, things that you might be able to explore, because that is something that is a very wanted skill right now across this industry, especially at PPD part of Thermo Fisher, is someone who can actually review informed consent or ICF, just because literally that tells the patient what's going on in the study, right? So we want to make sure that that's clear and that they understand what's going on. So that's another piece and another skill that people can work on if you're interested in Study Startup.
And to piggyback off that, I was going to say quality assurance. And I think a big part of being able to review an informed consent form is being able to be able to be meticulous, because the thing about informed consent is literally quite in its name. The person has to have informed consent. And so for a patient to be informed, they have to be able to comprehend the information. And so being able to really take a close look at the language and see how it's presented, like they'll tell you, you need to write it like you're doing it for a child so that they can understand it. And that's not because people are stupid, but it's because across the board, people need to be able to understand in the most layman's terms what they're signing and what they're agreeing to, or either what they're denying. So I think quality assurance, and that also goes into, because we were talking about either regulatory coordinator, whether even if you're not a coordinator, you're a regulatory specialist, or your contracts and budgets, being able to take a close look at the documents, the contract language, the protocol, the budget, all of those moving pieces that are in Study Startup, which if you're not able to, can cause there to be a significant delay in startup, which is never what you want. So being able to be proactive and have your own method of quality assurance, because like for me, I work in CTA and budgets. And so before a contract is ever finalized and signed by the sponsor or the site or the CRO, whoever, there's still an entity that is going to do a QA, like a diligent QA review. But you can speed up, like Tiffany spoke to, you can always make Study Startup faster. So you using your own quality assurance skills to do a diligent review of whatever it is that you're doing before it even gets there enables there to be a quicker turnaround time for approvals, and then obviously a quicker turnaround time for activation.
I will also add, because I used to review ICFs as well as a coordinator, having patience. And that's when I knew, I'm like, reviewing ICFs is not for me, because you have to review the ICF and be able to add the language and make sure, that the sponsor agrees with the language, going back and forth with the IRB, making sure that everyone's language is present and everyone is satisfied with the ICF. So having patience to go through the document and going back through the review process So that was difficult for me because I don't have a lot of patience. So, but I definitely want to add that that's something, a skill set that you would need to have, and being able to see, you know, like with the ICF and other projects all the way through, and making sure that it's complete and thorough. So I am going to pass it over to Andrika.
Yes, ma'am, I am here. And thank you, Brittany and Tiffany, for breaking that down, because in my new role, I'm kind of like essentially study startup PM, because we are a startup division within the company. So I do a lot of this CTA reviewing and then ICF review as well. And then we're going to do kickoff meetings and site initiation visits as well. So a lot of that is really along the lines of what I'm doing now. So for those of you who don't know, we have 4 phases of clinical research, just in case there's someone new joining here and want to enter the industry. So how does the study startup process differ across each phase? And Tiffany, you can go first. Thank you.
I really feel like with each phase it's the same. Like, how quickly can we get things going so that we can get this drug out to the patients? Whether it's we're doing stuff in the lab from the very beginning, whether we're at phase 4 and we're looking at the efficacy, the goal is to get the drug out, right? So how can we get things done quickly? And I think that's one of the things that we need to remember when we're working in study startup is how can we do things quickly, but with quality, right? Because a lot of times we get to moving so fast and we forget that there is quality. And at the end of the day, the FDA can show up at any time, and we got to be prepared for that. So we don't want to forget those pieces. We want to make sure that we're working efficiently, but with quality. And I think that's just across all 4 phases that's the goal.
Thank you. Brittany, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say something along those same lines, or the only thing that I would say that I would add to it is kind of while for my role as a CTA and budget specialist, I really only am that phase 1 startup, obviously, to get the CTA and the budget negotiated and fully executed, and all the other phases, we're not having to continue to renegotiate a CTA and the budget. So to make it applicable, if this is something that you're interested in, CTA and budgets, maybe in additional phases. So I would say the questions that are asked on a higher level, like an operational level of a clinical study, I would say the questions that are asked are different. I feel like phase 1 is more so like, is the treatment safe? And phase 2 is more so, sorry, I had to take notes on this, guys. But does the treatment work? And then phase 3 is like, more so that's when it starts getting real, because you start talking about FDA approval and you start looking at its performance against other drugs that are already in the industry and already performing. And then phase 4 is really just looking at how we could make this drug better if need be, how we need to change it. So I feel like on a higher level, the different questions that are asked, maybe by people that are creating the protocol, or maybe people that are actually involved at these different phases, the study coordinators, the clinical coordinators, the nurses, those are the type of questions that are asked in each phase. But like Tiffany said, it's still going to just be about being able to work efficiently, safely, quickly, to be able to get all of the tasks and responsibilities completed.
Thank you. So like all of us, we all have some, typical challenges in our day-to-day roles. So what are some of your typical challenges as in the study startup phase, I should say? And Brittany, you can go first.
My constant challenge is there's never enough time. Like Tiffany said earlier, like you can make a to-do list, and I do, and genuinely by 9 o'clock, it is out the window every day, every time. And so, or it's like extremely long. So I would say that one challenge is constantly not having or feeling like I don't have the time to do what I need to do. I think another thing is kind of like what Danielle was saying, what she didn't like about regulatory. So my job is very much so, I'm a very, very like pestilent middleman, because I'm negotiating contract and budget. So I'm always in between the sponsor directly and the site directly. So and my job is to make sure that really essentially both of them are happy. The sponsor obviously does not want to have to come out of pocket a lot if they don't have to, and the site wants them to come out as much as they can so that they can get as much as they can with clinical trials. So and my job is to somehow figure out how to make both of them happy in a quick amount of time so that we can get this done and get the site activated. So being able to continuously keep those communication lines open so that we can have healthy discussions, and being able to constantly, and also because I work with different sponsors. So with keeping those communication lines open, being able to learn the different sponsors very quickly, because what my Pfizer sponsor wants is not what my Orbis sponsor wants. They don't have the same requirements. So being able to adapt very quickly is probably, I would say, would be another challenge that you can look forward to in study startup, specifically with this role, just the issue of time, and then being able to manage different demands of very demanding sponsors, because all of your sponsors are demanding in their own little special way. So adapting to that very quickly. And then also, I would say not necessarily a challenge, but what can be challenging at first. So I'll say the latter part of it. One thing that is going to be helpful for you is to put the time in to understand your project managers, your teammates, the way they work, their working styles. That can be challenging at first to learn, but it really will behoove you, because it allows you, especially if you have a role like CTA and budgets, which can be very concentrated and very involved with all entities. Because like Tiffany said, there are some sites that they won't even begin sending in their regulatory documents until the budget is completed. So you need to be able to communicate with these different entities and do it effectively. So being able to manage different demands of your sponsors and your team is going to be a challenge.
Thank you, Brittany. And how about you, Tiffany? At your level, what kind of challenges do you face?
So I'll tell you about my level, and then I'll also tell you about some of my issues that my team deals with. So first, with my team, they have to remember that the study they're working on is not the only study that these sites work on, right? If you're working with a site, they have, if you are working on 5 studies, they might be working on 10 or 15 studies, right? So when you call them, you ask them for something, they aren't just sitting there waiting on your phone call. Somebody else at 4 other CROs probably has called them today as well and asked them for something.
Yep.
So how do you think outside of the box to get what you need from that site? And I would say that's about building a relationship, letting them know. Are you being upfront with them about the timelines and deadlines that have been set for your study, right? Because if you just call saying, hey, I need such and such from you, that's great, but can you tell them why? Because our study wants first site active by such and such date. We want this many sites active by such and such date. Give people a reason to understand why you're blowing up their email, why you keep calling them, not that you're just want to talk to them, right? Let them know why you're calling. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that my team deal with. And then also, my teams, they also deal with sponsors sometimes wanting to bypass internal processes, right? Because they're like, we're not held to those processes. Can't we just bypass that? So a lot of times I have my teams coming to me asking me, Tiffany, is this okay? Can we handle that? And what I would say is making sure you understand proper escalation pathways when your team has asked you to do something that you're not sure about. You have a lot of times you have study startup leads or managers, and then you have your line manager like me. So using those escalation pathways to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. I love in this industry, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So you have the conversation, write it down, keep it, save it, because everything is on pen, paper, email. That's how we verify things in this industry. So for me, a challenge I have now is that I'm a manager and I love people and I like to back my people up. So sometimes the mama bear in me comes out, right? Because I'm all about, listen, this is my team, this is my people. So I used to be a study startup lead. So I used to work with the sponsors. And so I know how it can be stressful, but now my job is to protect my team. So I have to find the right line to protect my team, but also remember that we are a service organization providing a service to a sponsor. So where sometimes I want to just say, no, we can't do that. I have to remember to be open-minded and be flexible and pivot so that we can do what we need to do to get the study started. So that's one of the challenges for me, because I always want to just tell them, no, I think outside of the box so that, you know, my people can learn. But that is what I would say. And then also just dealing with different people on study teams in general. You're going to come across some people who have pleasant personalities and some people who have difficult personalities, and you've got to be able to navigate that on both ends. And that could be the study coordinator. She's had a long day and you call her and she is just snippy and you like, I just call her, answer her one thing. Or it could be your study lead, the sponsor has come down on her and or him, and they are passing that the grief that they got from the sponsor onto you. You like, wait a minute, where did all this come from? So just learning how to sometimes not take everything so personal, because sometimes it can feel like the attack, and really it's just the stress. But definitely don't allow anybody to walk all over you, but just put yourself in their shoes. That's one thing I think is important too, right? Because if someone gave me $1 million and say, we're gonna put all your $1 million into this drug, I'd be calling somebody all the time too, right? Or I'd be on the CRO like, listen, what are y'all doing? Are you doing what you need to do? Because I got $1 million riding on this, right? So sometimes we have to step outside of the box and see that as well. So it's hard, but that's the truth. I mean, this is, for them, it's life-changing therapies, but it's also a money thing as well.
Absolutely. I don't think all staff aren't privy to the amount of money that goes into these projects. So that's really important to know that a lot of funding goes into these studies, millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And also building those relationships with the site side. I've predominantly been on the site side. I just crossed over to the industry. Very important to build those relationships. The site side does a lot of work. So put some respect on the site staff, please. So definitely all great advice there. In terms of keeping up with regulations in this industry, how are you ensuring compliance on your side in study startup? And Brittany, you can go first.
So as a contract and budget specialist, thankfully, one thing I don't have to worry about really is submitting or like having to attend to any type of regulations, because that was one thing I didn't like about regulatory, keeping up with making sure that the sites, to make sure to see if any license were expired, just do they need to submit to the IRB? Like that was not my jam. So I will honestly pass that to Tiffany because I don't have to, thankfully.
Lucky you.
There's pros and cons to these things, right? Pros and cons.
Yeah,
right?
It is. You got to pick your poison. Yeah, your poison. I picked a different poison.
I tell you all the time, as a manager, I ride my regulatory specialist a lot more than I ride my contract specialist, right? Because they're negotiating the budget and contract, and that's important. But that site is going to send that budget and contract back for 50,000 rounds, and there's nothing they can do until they agree on a budget, right? You can get the site on the phone, you get a sponsor on the phone, the site say they want $10,000, they want $10,000, and you're not gonna budge, right? So we, but for my regulatory specialist, most companies have ICF checklists, a document that you can use to review the ICF to make sure that you're ensuring that all parts of the ICF are there. We also have essential document checklists. So for those regulatory documents, it's a document that tells you what should be there, how you should review it, what's needed for your actual study, right? Because every study doesn't collect every document. And 9 times out of 10, every CRO has that. So that's one of those wonderful perks that you can have and you can use and you should use, because like Brittany said earlier, one study may say this, one study may say something else. So literally it's a document that you get at the beginning of each study to guarantee that you are reviewing it correctly. Not sure if you know, but the 1572 expires every couple of years. So that's one of the things that you got to keep up with. CVs expires every 2 years. So it's just things like that that you remember. And one thing I can say about just my career growth and being a manager, you never stop learning. And even though I'm not reviewing regulatory documents on a day-to-day basis, if my team is in a crunch and they need an ICF review, because I have that skill, I can do that. That's that thinking outside of the box. That's that, what can I do to help? That's not my day-to-day, but I'll do what I got to do to get things done. And so just wanted to put that out there, that even as you climb the ladder, that doesn't mean you detach from it. You just take those skills and hone in on them. And I'm thankful that I get to do that, because if not, I would probably lose it, right? So I still know how to review reg docs. I still know how to review ICF. So I would just want to encourage you that don't think it's just something you need to know for time being. It's something that is a lifelong skill for sure.
Thank you, ladies. I'm going to pass it over to Courtney.
Thank you, Andrika. So you ladies have given us a great insight so far on what study startup entails, but can you give us an example? And I'm sure you have many, but just one example that sticks out in your head of any time that you have participated in a successful study startup and how that impacted the overall ending of the study. And we can start with you, Brittany.
Yes. So one thing about me with contracts and budgets, because it's such a concentrated position and everybody is waiting for you to do that so they can probably do what they need to do, I'm very big on execution. I'm very big on timelines, and I'm just really a little bit of a perfectionist in my role. I do not like for me to be the reason that we are having a late activation. So yeah, I work like that. So I carry that with me in all of my studies. So all that to say, I try to always have successful studies that I'm on, but most recently, we had a study with a sponsor, Nuversen, I believe, Nuversen Laboratories. And sometimes when you're awarded a study, they will, like prior to conversations that they may have with you, a activation bonus may be something that they talk about. And essentially what that is the sponsor and the CRO, they agree to, like, if you guys are able to get so and so many sites activated before this date, you'll get an additional bonus for your CRO, which is going to be helpful for your CRO, helpful for you, so that you guys can get more work. And so one of my recent studies, I had transferred onto the study after another individual had unfortunately been laid off. It was a 30-site study, and half of them needed to be activated. I think it was like within 3 months. And just so for context, a lot of times it could take like 3 to 4 months to negotiate just one contract and budget. And so for 15 sites, thankfully, they were all under one SMO. So I was able to negotiate one contract and budget and make that applicable to all 15 sites so that we can execute that within the 3 months. And my CRO was able to get the activation bonus. So obviously, like Tiffany said, everyone loves money. So, that was a good win for my team, for me, for my CRO. It's, like one thing about clinical research and study startups specifically, it's extremely team oriented. And so it's not one of those things where you can fly under the radar. Like if you do not do your part, if you do not do your work, it will directly affect someone else's ability to do theirs. And you will get calls, you will get emails and team chats and all of those great, amazing things. So it really was just a great win for the team, which is great for the company.
Thank you. Tiffany, anything?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you've seen the commercials for the Naro. It is a COPD inhaler. I actually worked on that study, and there's no greater joy than to turn on the TV, see the commercial for the drug you worked on. That's it, right? Like I told you all, my husband and I both ran clinical research. We are such geeks. We watch commercials just to see who the sponsor is, like who created that drug, right? So literally the first time I saw that commercial, I was overjoyed. I worked on that study in study startup and also during the phase where I was an in-house CRA. Y'all, some of those days, when they were cleaning that data, I was like, Lord, I'm not gonna make it. Because if they asked me to call this site one more time to clean some data, I'm gonna lose it. But when I finally saw that that drug on the market, on the commercial, I mean, that's it right there. That brings everything full circle. And the word there is impact. And somebody else is literally able to breathe better, even though I wasn't breathing. At the time, somebody else is able to breathe better because of that. So that is my success story.
Awesome. I know that's one thing that I think I'm ready to see is a drug on TV that I have helped with, and just say that I have done what I set out to do when I started my healthcare career, was to help make the world better, right? And so one thing that you both have mentioned recently and throughout our whole conversation was just the matters of teamwork and constantly keeping the avenues of communication open. So what are the ways that you handle communication across the board during study startup, whether it be with the sponsor, whether it be with the study sites, your team members, your employees? How do you all handle that? Tiffany, Tiffany, we'll start with you.
When it comes to the sponsor, sponsors like for you to be open and honest with them, right? Mm-hmm. It's called under projecting and then actually making the projection, right? So what that means is we're going to tell them we can get 10 sites activated. We probably really feel that we can get 15, but let's tell them 10 and then let's shine with 15. Let's not tell them 15 and then get 2, because that causes an uproar. So open and honest conversations with your sponsor is definitely key. They understand that this isn't the only study that your CRO has. This isn't the only study you're working on. It's not the only study the site works on. They want to still feel like theirs is the only one. So you have to find that balance between that. But the biggest thing is being open with them about what you can do and not about what you can't do. So that is with sponsors. On a day-to-day, I think it's important for the regulatory specialists, like Brittany mentioned before, and the contract specialists to have communication all the time, right? Because like Brittany said, you can't get lost. Your work depends on somebody else doing their work, and their work depends on you doing their work, right? So you got to have that communication and keep it flowing. Okay, so site won't give you the reg docs until you get a fully executed contract. Have you talked to them? Have you heard them? What are you thinking? Oh, Brittany says it's going to be 3 months. Okay, making a note, check back with Brittany in a month to see what's going on. Don't wait 3 months to check back with Brittany. Check back with Brittany in another month to see what's going on, right? That's that thinking outside of the box again, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the communications you need with that. Like I said, with project teams, it could get a little dicey sometimes. Just from my position as a manager, like I said, just trying to make sure I provided support to my team. So just, being willing to be that team player at all times. It literally is just a team, y'all. I mean, you, the site, the sponsor, the regulatory specialist, the contract specialist, everybody is a team. And we have to remember our goal is to get the drug on the market. And if we keep that in the forefront, then it's easy for us to say, okay, what can we do? How can we get this done? So I think that's just the biggest piece of communication.
Right. And definitely being a team. And, let's hear from Brittany, because you were able to communicate with a sponsor from your example, that you were able to get a certain number of sites under one contract and you made them feel special. So how were you able to really, not just that particular instance, but just in general across the board, how are you able to communicate those things, to just tell the sponsor that, hey, I'm here for you. I know you're spending a lot of money, so I want your money to work for you, and I want your money to work for the world.
Yeah, most certainly. And this kind of just goes into my personality, but also what is required of me in my role in contracts and budgets is to be very direct and straightforward, which from the sponsor side, like Tiffany said, is really the one thing that they appreciate. And even if something is going wrong, there's still a way to present that. Or if there is going to be a delay, there's a way to present that. And there's a way to be direct about what is actually going on. But I think sometimes what saves the sponsor relationship is you need to come with a corrective action too. So we are not going to be able to activate on the 13th, but we will on the 15th because we're expediting X, Y, and Z. So being able to show the sponsor that even in the case of the, a downfall or where you may have like a gap in the process or something like that, that you guys are actively working on filling that. So with the sponsor, I would say just being direct, but just in general, I'm very big on, because within my role, it's more of it's a contract specialist role, but there's a lead piece to it, which requires me to be able to meet with other contract specialists, maybe junior specialists or new hires, and be able to train them and also just kind of do something like this and allow them to do QA. So I'm big on meetings. And so like I tell all of my contract specialists, if your project manager or your CTL does not initiate a weekly meeting for you guys to catch up on your studies progress so that all team members can be on the same page, you request it. You see what everybody's availability is. You get everybody on a quick team chat. It does not have to be long, a quick Teams chat. Just some applicable things in your day to day would be like meetings and also creating trackers. I know, like for me, I always on every study, I always create a tracker, and whatever you guys' little intranet is, I make it available there so that all of my team members can see like what site I'm working with, where the budget and CTA status is, when I project it to be fully executed, so that way my CRA can then start having proactive conversations about maybe some dates for an SIV, and we can get in front of things. And speaking of getting in front of things, I think just with working in teamwork is to think proactively, and to think proactively, not reactively, because a study startup, there's always going to be a fire to put out. So you already know that you're going to have to answer some problems that you weren't expecting. But what you want to do to be like a major factor on your team, to stand out, to just help your team get to a quicker activation, is to think proactively. And I had saw a comment in here that was saying that it was when Tiffany was speaking that sites also have to be honest too, when she was talking about like direct conversation. And they should, but unfortunately that's just not something that you can control. And so a big part of that is understanding that like a lot of times sites aren't honest. And so for example, I had a site today that was newly introduced to the study, and she was giving me like a rundown of their startup process and what type of committees have to review documents and things of that nature. And all that's great, but you can ask questions that will kind of corner sites, so that way they cannot be unhonest, or if they are going to be unhonest, you can at least kind of see through it. So if you guys have a startup process, how long does that usually take? Or asking questions like, okay, if it takes 3 to 4 months, is November a good time that we can expect? Like really learn your role and become an expert in your role is a really great benefit to your team as well, and being a good team player and just understanding, like thinking proactively, because there's going to be so many things that like you can't control. That's really what Steady Startup is, getting to activation after like defeating a whole bunch of things that you could not control. So definitely thinking proactively is going to be a big part of that as well.
Nice, nice. And I definitely love how you mentioned getting in front of a problem or thinking proactively instead of reactively. I think that is something that a lot of just sections in general across clinical research have adopted over the years, is just being a critical thinker, like thinking ahead of what problems could present themselves and having a solution to that issue. Speaking of having solutions to issues, considering what is going on right now in the industry, we're seeing an unprecedented situation where some things are getting a little iffy with the jobs. Where do you see, in your opinions, current trends going for study startup teams and future prospects for careers, and how can someone who wants to be a part of this portion of the industry stay updated on developments?
That's a really good question. I think for me, one thing that I've noticed post-pandemic, and when I say post-pandemic, I would say maybe the start of 2023, is a lot of condensing of study startup teams and companies trying to be able to get the most out of their study startup team without having as large of teams. I don't really know like a better way to say that, but not having as large of teams. So with that, the condensing of study startup teams, I think one way to stay agile in the field, whether you're working in it or trying to get in it, is honing in on what you are an expert on and knowing that. And also being able to advocate for that in your working space, whether it's at your current job or whether it's during the interview time, being able to advocate for yourself and your expertise and know where you fit in the puzzle. I think maybe like around 2019, when I first was introduced to clinical research, for me, I felt like clinical research was more forgiving as far as allowing people with no experience at all to come in and kind of get their feet wet and like learn it and figure out where they may be. And right now I feel like post-pandemic, that's not where we are in clinical research. I feel like a lot of people are expecting people to have a prior knowledge that will enable them to hit the ground running. So whatever you can do to give yourself that any up, I think is helpful when your job search or also in your current job, staying on top of trends and things of that nature in your current job. But I definitely think for me, a trend I think is seeing that our study startup teams are becoming smaller. So with that, you may find it harder to find a job, or taking it like the interview processes are longer or more thorough, or you're seeing more layoffs. I think that's because of the condensing of teams and trying to just get more done honestly with less amount of people. And I also think that like you'll start to see more, but maybe on the flip side of that, we may see more flexibility because of the pandemic. A lot of things became remote. So I think that on the flip side of that, in some areas, it may open up opportunities that weren't previously there, which may open up more roles where people can kind of slide their way in if they're looking for, just that foot in the door, just because of the flexibility that working remote allows companies to give to their employees. And medical device studies was one thing that I wanted to write down. I feel like that's one thing that I've seen increase, and I think that it's going to increase even more, especially with the prevalence of like artificial intelligence and technology and all that great stuff. We're going to start to see more medical devices, more medical device studies. So that may be an area if you don't know a lot about. And I know like for me, you should always stay open to employers and jobs. So a lot of times when people are reaching out to me, they're like, do you have any experience with medical device studies? Can you tell me about that? Which 2-3 years ago, that wasn't a question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tiffany, I know you have had some conversations with some of your employees. Is there anything in particular that you have said to them that might have helped them guide them on, anything that could help them kind of like stay relevant within their company?
One thing I would tell anyone is take the entry-level job, even if it's the call center, take the job, right? Because all you need is one yes to create many, many more yeses.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because if you're in the call center job, then that gives you the opportunity to have your manager set you up with somebody for the role that you want to be in, right? And say, hey, when you're doing some work, I got some downtime, can I shadow you, right? Because that's exposure. And if you are exposed to it, you can speak to it. When I'm in interviews, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for someone who understands and wants to learn and wants to grow. But you have to have the basics. So take the entry-level job and grow from there. I will say, yes, right now, clinical research is kind of slow with hiring. I don't think that's going to be forever. I've been in this industry for 13 years. It goes in ebbs and flows. Once we all kind of settle out and figure out everything from COVID, I'm sure probably next year this time, everybody will be back to we need. What we have to realize is that when COVID came—
I put my phone down. Put it down.
It's okay. When COVID came, we were working at warp speed, right? There were people working weekends to get the Moderna and the Pfizer COVID vaccines out. Now it seems like stuff has slowed down, but really we're just back to pre-COVID and we're actually breathing, right? We're not like worker bees anymore. So I think that's something for people to realize. Is not that we lost any of the work, it's just the speed has slowed down, and that's okay. So we just need to ride the wave and allow it to balance out, and the jobs will come back because we are still winning awards. Sponsors are still making investments into new drugs. So the work is going to continue. And so, like I said, as far as Steady Startup, make the connections, find a mentor, say, hey, on your free time, talk to me about this, explain this to me, ask the questions, learn the terminology, right? If you don't even know what a 1572 is, find out what it is. Find out what a financial disclosure is. Find out what a CB is, some of the requirements. Like those are things that no one, you don't have to be in a job to go and learn those things, right? And those are the things that are gonna make you marketable. Also, same thing with the ICF, right? Like you can go Google ICF right now, informed consent, and it'll probably tell you the parts of the informed consent. You don't have to be working at a CRO to do that. Take the time, invest in yourself, right? I tell my team all the time, this is your career, you own it. I'll help you get to where you wanna go, but you own your career. Contract specialist, you know you like to crunch those numbers, start crunching them even more so you can get quicker, right? So that when that budget comes to you, you don't have to spend a lot of time. You can go back and get through it. Find somebody like Brittany and say, hey, what are the parts of a contract and how do you go back and forth? Because to be honest, I know a few parts of a contract. I don't know them like I know parts of ICF. So Brittany, girl, what kind of conversations are you having when you talk to your sites about the contract? And what are some things that are, or what are some key, what are some sticklers, right? What do you see a lot of sites not budge on? What is it? Is it the schedule of events, or is it they want this amount of money for this particular item? What are some sticklers that you see? So that, you know, when I think about becoming a contract specialist, I can already know, hey, I need to look about this. Brittany told me a lot of sites don't budge on this. So those are the type of things you can do to think outside of the box to help yourself be seen. And I do think that the jobs, they will open up. We just gotta let it ride away. And it's not just Steady Startup. It's not a PPD thing. It is an industry thing. I've been in, like I said, 13 years. I've never seen this before. So I don't think it's here to last, because if for 13 years, we've always been higher. Now, from a manager standpoint, I am excited not to be doing as many interviews right now. But I am looking forward to opening the doors up to allow new people to come in. So just hang tight, keep in contact with me. A lot of you, if you haven't met me, you know I love to help people look for jobs. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to share any knowledge with you at any time.
Great. And I do agree with that. Not being a one-trick pony. I don't want to necessarily say it like that, but being willing to be flexible and learning different skills. And, I know at PPD, we have camera pages and we have different types of classes that we can take on CRG Learns that are free. So it's like, when you have free time, go into those areas and take those different classes, talk to people, be open and honest with your managers. If you tell them where you want to go, or, you feel like you're not being challenged enough, what else can I do? Like, what other thing can I do? They might be able to show you a different pathway. They might be able to say, hey, I have a team that needs to do site payments. You ever done site payments before? No? Okay, well, I know you're a quick learner. Let's get you in on that. And then you have another task that you can do. And you have another thing that you can say, this is what I know how to do. I'm great at it. You should keep me. But thank you, ladies, so much. I know we are almost at time. So Danielle, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All righty, thank you so much. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to come off of mute or to ask a question in the chat.
There are a lot of questions in the chat.
Really? Okay. I thought it seemed like we were answering some. I just saw one.
Say there was one question while Tiffany and I was talking that I saw come up that I did want to speak to. And I think someone was asking, like, what advice would you give for someone that doesn't have a bachelor's degree? And in general, if you don't have a associate, a bachelor's degree, really no formal education as far as science and technology, math, something that would, they would have as a general requirement. One thing that is going to really work to your strength is being able to network with people who do, network with people who are in the industry. So obviously being in a place like this, in a group like this, is going to be very transformational, but it's not just, like I tell my clients all the time, it's not just being in this space, it's really maximizing your potential in these spaces. So yes, these things are good, but afterwards reaching out, whether it be to Tiffany, me, Danielle, Courtney, all of these different resources, or even if you've met someone in the group that's working at a place that, or working in the role that you want to, you may not have the requirements right now, but you can meet with somebody and ask them, like, what could I do? What kind of job right now, or what kind of career could I get right now that would help me be able to leverage into, an entry level clinical research career? So networking is going to be super pivotal, and intentional networking, not just being on LinkedIn, like adding anybody, adding specific, like very intentional people, whether it be project managers, people that are in recruiting and things of that nature, especially recruiters that are recruiting for clinical research for CROs, because they are vetting for these companies, so they know what they want. And so being able to have a nice fit, and they love doing, like recruiters love doing things like that, having a nice 15 to 20 minute chat with them, letting them view your resume, having someone view your resume, because that also could be one of the things that's stopping you at the door if you don't have the general requirements on your resume that you need. And I know that in this group that they have like a resume reviewer, they have an interview prep specialist. So really maximizing the resources that you have around you is going to be what you have to do. And to just kind of speak to that, and that's not to negate the very human part of it, where it can be discouraging, where it can feel like you are continuously running into a brick wall. But like Tiffany said, all you need is one yes. Nobody said it was going to be easy or going to come quickly, but all you need is that one.
Okay, so we have another question.
Uh-huh.
PPD has a role called feasibility site specialist. Where does this role rank in study startup? And does it have less moving parts to keep up with, or is it deadline heavy?
Oh, feasibility, baby, listen.
I don't know, because I be buzzing about feasibility. If you ain't picking the right sites for studies,
Listen, feasibility is busy, okay? Because during feasibility, the sponsor has no sites. They don't have any sites that have committed to be in their study. So they may tell you, this is your 50 sites, and we need you to call them, email them almost daily, because we need them to sign the CDA, confidentiality disclosure agreement. Because before we can share a protocol with them, they have to sign that document so that they won't disclose what the protocol is about. And once you sign that and the sponsor signs it, then you can share the protocol with them. But it is heavy follow-up, to the point where the feasibility team used to be in the team that I'm in, and we separated out from them because it was just too much for our team to do regulatory contracts and worry about feasibility. So it definitely falls in the study startup umbrella. It is definitely very busy, and you definitely have to think outside of the box for that role.
Yeah, and I would say even down the road, feasibility is very important, because Tiffany said at that point, the sponsor has no sites that have committed to the study. So feasibility has to understand what they need to do to, if the 50 sites, say for instance, the 50 sites that you've been introduced to are not responsive, what type of marketing do you need to do, and what type of industries do you need to market to get applicable sites? Because understanding what type of study this is and what type of sites may want to even be involved in the type of study that you're trying to enroll them for. Because the flip side of that is, once it comes to the CTA and budget, sometimes there are sites, once they get to that point, where they really weren't that feasible for this study, and now it's going to take a longer time for us to get started up, and now that was the issue that could have been resolved in feasibility. So like feasibility is very important, but honestly, just in general, there's no role in study startup that's like less anything. Like everything is very, very important, or stuff is not going to get activated.
Okay, let's see.
I had a question about is it possible to do any kind of shadowing virtually? Because if you have a remote job, I'm not in the office,
Yeah,
so to
absolutely.
speak. Yeah, so is there like a confidentiality agreement that you have to have with somebody, since it's maybe from a different company or anything like that?
I would try to do it within your company that you work for.
Okay.
so that we keep things confidential, definitely. But there's nothing wrong with doing it remotely. Set up a Teams meeting, share that screen, and have at it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have to do a remote, I have to shadow a remote visit to complete CRA Academy. And that's making me a little nervous, but that's the only way that we're able to do it right now. So it's possible.
Okay, we're gonna take our last question because I know we are over on time. Janelle?
So let me just add this. I'm just going to piggyback off. So it's good to be versatile in the industry, because I know I've done a little bit of everything. So you kind of have to, have that flexibility in order to hop around from, different places. A lot of the places that I did work at, I pretty much was valuable in that sense, because I could do more than one thing, one job or whatever, because I've kind of been in the field for 18 years. So I've done a little bit of everything, including study startup. Shout out to y'all. But that's all I just wanted to add. So that's it.
Danielle, can I please answer the question for the person who asked about the Farm D? I just want to let them know that PPD actually has a position where we hire pharmacists. In our call center environment, people can call in after the drug is on the market. They may call in, like if they're having reactions and stuff like that. And we actually have pharmacists who help answer those questions and work with them. So PPD does hire pharmacists. So that is definitely a position.
And nurses can work in that same
Yeah.
call line. One of my friends does. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I know this has been a great conversation and we are over on time, and I want to be very conscious of everyone's time tonight. Thank you so much for joining. I always like to write down little notes. So if you see me over here, I write down little notes, little key points as well, just so that we have some takeaways. And so I really feel like when it comes to study startup, it's important to be organized. Being a person that has, if you're driven, if you're passionate, being able to communicate and being a team player. And so I think those are some key points that, that you'll be successful with having a study startup role. And so thank you to Tiffany, thank you to Brittany, thank you to my hosts, Courtney and Andrika. If you have any questions, please, 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 I tell people this all the time because we don't do it enough. Reach out, network. If you want to be involved in study startup, Tiffany and Brittany are open to you hopping in their DMs. So go ahead over there and hop in their DMs now. Don't wait later on tonight or then the next day. You're like, oh my goodness, I forgot to send them a message. So put your LinkedIn URL in the chat so that you can connect with everyone. Because I say this all the time, because I look here sometimes and your name on here is not the same as your LinkedIn name. So I'm not judging, but so just go ahead and put your LinkedIn URL here in the chat so that you can connect and ask questions. And so while I still have you guys here, I want to mention that the Black Women in Clinical Research Conference is happening in October at the North Carolina Biotech Center. I am excited. And I am excited to see a lot of the members, for us to be in a place, and I really want people to really realize how much, like, this is history being made. I have not, since I've been in the industry, and it hasn't been that long, maybe about 6 years, I haven't seen a conference that's organized for us, that is put on by us. So please support Black Women in Clinical Research. If Black Women in Clinical Research has ever done anything for you or helped you within your journey, please attend. We need to show up. We need to show the industry that we are here and that we have a voice. So I have some guests that I will announce later on that I'll keep that a secret. You just might have to come to find out who those special guests are. But I promise it's going to be a weekend of all great events, a meetup. We're going to have some wine and drinks and dancing and all of that, but we're still going to be professional at the same time and, to really network. So please, if you have not signed up for the Black Women in Clinical Research Conference, I really appreciate everyone. I won't hold you any longer, but I just want to thank each and every one that joined tonight, for being a member, for supporting Black women in clinical research. It means a lot to me, and I thank everyone for helping another Black woman, in this clinical research industry, because like we always say, send the elevator back down. If you get up to, a higher position, or you have the means to help another Black woman, please do so. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.